Welcome, everybody, to Todd and Shane's Cloudy Podcast, number 397, recorded live Wednesday, July 18th, 2018. For those of you that are watching the video version of this or watching it live, you've already noticed a vast improvement that we've made to the podcast for a couple of weeks now, and that is that we don't have Shane on here. He's busy again this week. I'm beginning to think he doesn't love you guys quite as much as I do. But never fear. I am your bedrock. I am your foundation. I will never give you up. I'll never let you go. I'll never run around or desert you. Any of those things, because I am here this week. And I think, Shane might actually be gone next week too. I don't know what we're going to do next week. We both have some things going on. But this week, it is just you and it is just me together, cozy for the podcast. Speaking of the podcast, I have to thank our sponsors, the folks at SysKit, and we are going to talk a little bit more about them later, but they help make all of this possible. And so a shout out to those guys. If you haven't done it already, go out to syskit.com and download any of their numerous great products. My favorite is one called SP.Kit. But again, I'm getting ahead of myself. We will talk about that later in the podcast. All right, so what should we talk about with Shane not here? Well, I've already had one person admit to me in private, and I won't name this person, him or her, but they said they much prefer the podcast when they're just me, when it's all about me. And no, it wasn't my mom, though I'm sure she agrees that the podcasts that are just me are better than the ones with Shane. But I did want to bring that up. One of the things that happened in the last week is the second Tuesday of the month came. There was much jubilation, and there were many patches for all of our favorite Microsoft products. I got to do that thing where all of my Windows machines, clients and servers alike, randomly rebooted in the middle of any number of very important things that I was in the middle of. A funny story, I was in a customer call yesterday, and I was like 10 minutes into an hour-long call, and one of my kids comes downstairs and says, "Hey, there's a guy at the door that says he's going to shut the power off." I'm like, "What?" So I excuse myself from the customer call quickly. I run upstairs. Sure enough, it's a guy from the electric company. He's got an armful of meters, and he's like, "Hey, I'm going around the neighborhood replacing meters. We're going to have to bounce the power for a second. Do you have any computers in your house?" And I'm like, "Well, yes, dozens, as a matter of fact." And he's like, "Well, is this a bad time?" And I'm like, "Well, the worst, short of me doing surgery on somebody." But yeah, so I got lots of computers around here, but they've all been happily patching themselves over the last week. But there were a couple of things that I wanted to talk about around patching that this reminded me of. First off, for the July patches, and for the ones that we really care about, are SharePoint patches. SharePoint put out patches for all the products. For SharePoint 2016, there is no language dependent patch. So if you remember, there's a language independent patch and a language dependent patch. There is no dependent patch this month. So if you're bringing up a new 2016 farm, you install RTM, you install the June language dependent patch, and then the July independent patch. So it's mostly security fixes and things like that. And then there's also no Office Online Server patch this month. So if you're installing a new OOS server, then that also gets the June 2018 patch. For all of your patching information, you can go to toddclint.com, and then whichever version of SharePoint you want to find out the patches for, you can tag that at the end. So toddclint.com/SP2016 builds, SP2013 builds, and it's all across the top there in the band of whatever patches you need. Try to keep that up. I try to add notes as I find out problems, things like that. But that is one patch story I wanted to get out today, was not to be confused that the July patches seem to be missing. Another interesting patch story was doing a customer install earlier this week, and 2016 and all the trimmings, all the good stuff, and went to patch the Office Online server, and it wouldn't take the June patch. And it was funny because I felt like I was a smart guy, and I knew, well, there's no July patch, so I'm not even going to try that. I'll put the June patch on. That'll work, except it didn't work. And the error that I got was that the patch didn't find the expected version, but it was RTM and all this stuff. So it turns out the customer had downloaded all the ISOs for me. It was a very secure environment. I couldn't get in and just go out to the web and download crazy stuff and view cat videos on their server like I enjoy doing. but they had downloaded the RTM version of the OOS server from 2016, and the OOS patches are built off of the yearly install ISOs. So kind of the long story short with this, if you're installing a new farm with the Office Online server for SharePoint 2016, go out and download the most recent installer. So if this one is the one from fall of 2017, and that's what the patch is looking for. So if you download that, then you'll be able to put the recent patches on it. But that took a little time. I'd forgotten about that, and Shane and I were talking about it, and Trevor Seward on the web, and there was a bunch of conversations about that. But don't forget about that, so don't get tripped up by that. Another fun customer story this week was installing SharePoint 2016, and I've installed SharePoint, a bunch of times, and most of it is just muscle memory. It's kind of like signing my name or any of those kind of things. But I do have kind of a checklist that I go through, because a lot of times with customers, I'll be doing it with them. They'll be shadowing me and watching me while I'm doing it. And so I want to make sure that I do it in kind of a logical order so they can have some chance of following along. The other thing is, a lot of times when I'm installing for customers, I'm installing both production and test environments at the same time, and trying to interleave those things so that while I've got a long running process running on production, I can jump into test and start filling in some of the holes. So I have these checklists that I follow. And was working with a customer and got to the point in production where I created Central Admin, created the farm and all that. Central Admin popped up. Hooray, there was much rejoicing. Started clicking around, kind of showing the customer some places that we were going to be touching, and it was toward the end of the workday. So we finished up there, but one of the things that I was going to do that they didn't need to watch was I was going to install the patches. So they went ahead and signed off. I started the patch install on the production box, and at that point there was only one server in the farm. Installed it all, got it going. Well, I guess there was both servers in the farm. Installed the patch on both servers and let that run overnight, knowing that I was going to have to reboot at some point. Came back the next morning, the patches were finished, rebooted the boxes, came up and went to check to make sure that everything went in place, and Central Admin wouldn't come up anymore. And I had known, 16 hours before that, Central Admin had been happy. We'd been clicking around, having a good time, just me and Central Admin and the customer, but now it wouldn't come up. More specifically, it came up with an internal 500 error. Now, for those of you that have not gone to the trouble of memorizing all of the HTTP errors and what groups they're in and what each group means, and there's probably only one or two of you out there that haven't done that, but we're used to seeing 400 errors, like 403s and 404s. That's file can't be found. That's if you put the URL wrong or something. But the 400 level errors are document errors, content errors. They mean that the web server is up and it's talking to the client, but just there's a little bit at the end, just missing a little something. Can't find the right document. 500 errors. Those are puckering errors. Those are scary errors. Those are server-side errors. Those are everything is broken, Rome is burning kind of errors. So I got a little concerned when I saw that. And normally when that happens, that's an app pool issue. The app pool can't start, something like that. So I'm poking around in IIS, and I'm not seeing anything real obvious that's the problem. I tried rebooting again. I tried IIS resetting, and nothing had happened. So since I knew that it had worked before, you kind of break down when you're doing your troubleshooting. You're like, all right, when did it work last? What's changed since then? I'd put a patch on. Now, I don't mean to suggest that Microsoft patches break things from time to time, but Microsoft patches break things from time to time. And that was my first thought. I'm like, well, it was working. I put a patch on. I rebooted it, and oh, wait. And then I remembered that morning when I came back to reboot the box, when I went to reboot it, Windows told me that there was somebody else logged into the box. And so I was checking to see if it was like my customer, whatever that I've been talking to, and the other user that had been logged into the box, it looked like they had, I could see their processes inside of Task Manager. They had been installing some kind of software, and IIS Manager was one of the things that was open. I'm like, okay, so this is bad. We've made two big changes. Whoever that was logged in was doing some stuff in IIS, the very thing that's not working right now. And I installed some patches on the product that sits in IIS, the very thing that doesn't work right now. Rebooted the box again. It didn't fix it. So I talked to the customer and kind of told them the story that I told you. and said, I put this patch on a couple of servers for other customers, because at that point it was just the June patch, and it hasn't had this problem. So the patch itself is not fundamentally flawed. Can you talk to whoever and see what they did? And so he talked to the person, and the person that had been logged in on that box was part of the security team, and they were doing security things. This was another highly secure environment. And I said, okay, what did they do? Well, they installed this, they installed that, they did a bunch of stuff. And so I was kind of left to my own devices. And one of the techniques that I've learned over the years when troubleshooting SharePoint not working is just make everything an administrator to everything, everywhere, and see if that fixes it. And if it is, that means it's a permissions problem. And that comes from, 10 years ago when we used to install SharePoint 2003 and in 2007 as a domain admin and a local admin, and everything just worked. And then people started getting all finicky about security and least privileges. And then little pieces started breaking. So as we tried to figure out what permissions each account needed, as things would break, we would make it an admin, and then we would start backing things off. So at this point, that was the next thing that I tried. Central Admin runs as the SP Farm account. I made the SP Farm account a local admin, rebooted the box, and Central Admin came up. So it was clearly a permissions problem. So the patch had not broken anything, probably, but the thing worked. So I'm like, okay. So I had another server that was coming up, and it was all good. I was also doing all this in the test environment. So I installed everything in the test environment, created the farm in the test environment, tried to browse to Central Admin, and it was just broken. Same internal 500 error. Added SP Farm as the local admin, rebooted, had not put the patch on yet. Rebooted, and it was fine. So clearly it was that permissions issue. So at that point, I knew a couple of things. I knew that it was the security folks that had made some change, and everything seemed to be working except Central Admin. So I knew that the permission issue had something to do with IIS. The timer job service was working and all that, which also runs as SP Farm. So I continued on with my install, talking to the security folks. But then when I created my first web app, of course we use the SP web app account, and that didn't work. Internal 500 error. Add SP web app as a local admin, bounce everything, that worked. So I was able to continue through with my install, making my IIS accounts local admins, which was a horrible idea, especially in a highly secure environment. But it let me get secure, get SharePoint up and going while I was working back and forth with my security folks. I tell you all of that because one of the things that I had to provide them, so first I provided them my list of all the permissions that accounts need and all that, and they mostly ignored that because they didn't like it. But then I was able to come up with a document from Microsoft, and we've talked about different versions of this document over the years, that spells out exactly what level permissions each account needs. So right down to the permission level and the directory in the file system or the registry key or whatever that every single account needs to have. And so basically I sent that to them and I said, hey, you lock things down and that's great. I don't want anybody breaking into SharePoint either, but I need all of this and you broke all of this, so you need to fix all of this. So this is one of those web pages that's really good to have in your toolbox in case you have problems like this and you figure out that it's a permissions issue. You can send that on the way. So we did end up getting it figured out so that we didn't have to have local admins everywhere. But that was a good thing. I have not had to face that a lot lately. Another interesting thing was I talked about with them that the profile account has to have the replicating directory changes permission on Active Directory. They did not like that idea because number one, they just wanted to make things as secure as possible. And number two, that permission sounds scary. And so they told me they did it, except they didn't do it. And so when I started the profile service and tried to do my first sync with AD, it failed. Very obvious error in the ULS logs. This account doesn't have permission. I'm like, hey guys, the darndest thing just happened. I tried to do a sync and it said I didn't get permissions. And so they're like, oh gosh, our bad, we forgot that, try again. So I was able to get that all working again. So and I was talking to the security folks and I'm like, I have the same goal that you do. That's why I have all these accounts. I want least permissions. I want everything as tight as possible. I want to make this as hard as possible for bad guys to do bad things. But there was always that dance that you have to do with security folks. So that's a couple of things to keep in your toolbox. Speaking of failures and things not working very well, this week has an annual holiday that I'm a big fan of. It's Amazon Prime Day. I think it was yesterday. I forget exactly which day, but there's been like a week-long lead up to Prime Day. Amazon's been having all this stuff. If you're not familiar, Amazon Prime is a service that you pay, I don't know, $120 a year for now. And you get things like free 2-day shipping, and you get a bunch of their video stuff for free and a bunch of their audio stuff for free. I think there's about 6 boxes a day that show up at my house from Amazon. And so it just was a no-brainer for me to, I've been an Amazon Prime member for 100 years. But Prime Day, and it looks like from Lori saying in the chat room, a day and a half. Prime Day was, and we'll get to that, it came up. And so there's a big lead up to that. So the funny thing about Prime is if you look, Amazon is one of the big cloud players. You got Microsoft, you got Amazon, you got Google, and you got some others. But Amazon is really, with AWS, they're really a big player in this whole cloud game. And that mostly came from the fact that they recognized that with an online retailer, they needed to have a lot of resources for, elasticity to grow when demand grows, but then they ended up having a bunch left over. And so they decided to do this AWS thing to kind of sell some of that excess, and that ended up turning into a huge business for them. But that's kind of how all that laid out. So the funny thing about all that is Amazon, big player. Jeff Bezos was just named like the richest man ever in history yesterday or the day before. Prime Day happens. It's their big holiday. It's 6 months from Christmas, and it failed everywhere. Their services just couldn't keep up. AWS just crashed everywhere. And so people got a lot of very funny failure messages. Apparently, I didn't go. I tried to extract myself from Prime Day because I know that once I get down that rabbit hole, I end up with 14 boxes of things that I don't need. So I've tried to avoid that. But apparently, the error message is you try to create an order, browse to Prime, it would fail, and it was pictures of very sad dogs. So I like that they have some sense of humor about the failure, but it cracked me up that Amazon is this huge cloud platform and all that, and then their very own thing that they planned, like they knew this traffic was coming. They've been doing this for years, and it's their platform and their marketing, and their environment didn't handle it. So that was kind of a funny deal. But now that Prime Day's over, apparently Amazon's back to working great. So I thought that was funny. I kind of had to joke a little bit about that. It was fun stuff. As I look in the chat room, people buying all kinds of stuff. Lori bought a Fire Stick that she didn't need just to have a spare. Mark Chrisman almost bought a power washer. I don't even know if Mark Chrisman knows how to use a power washer, but it was there. I just avoided Amazon. Oh my God. So, well, I guess I didn't buy. So this is a funny story. This is kind of off topic. Amazon a while back started creating these dash buttons. So it was this idea that you had a button next to a thing that you used a lot. And so I'll use this as an example. This is a dash button for Keurig coffee. The idea is that you put this next to a thing that you use a lot. And when you need more of it, you hit the button, and then it automatically goes out to Amazon and orders you more of the thing. Brilliant on their part. Normally, these buttons cost $5 a piece, and you get some kind of credit or something. But a year or so ago, they went on sale for 99 cents a piece. And some people on the internet figured out that you can use these not for Amazon purchases, but for anything. So essentially what they did is they put a network sniffer out there, and this thing is off all of the time. It's using no power right now. When you press the button, it livens itself up, it attaches to your wireless network, sends a command out to Amazon to order a thing. So some very smart nerds on the internet decided that if they just did a snoop on the network for this device's MAC address, it's off now. If I hit the button, then they can see that the device came online and then do anything, anything that you want to do with the box. So I'm like, that's awesome. 99 cents a piece, I would do that. So I bought 2 of these things to do that with. 99 cents a piece, money well spent. And then promptly didn't do anything with them because I ended up having all these ideas for stuff I wanted to do. I've got Philips Hue lights everywhere. There's a bunch of people that have things for that. You can press one of these and it'll turn on Philips Hue lights. People have projects for logging things to spreadsheets and just all kinds of stuff. So I had a million ideas. And what I ended up finding out was I had a million ideas and only 2 of these buttons. And I never did anything with them for like a year. So then leading up to Prime, Amazon did a sale, and they're like, all right, we got these dash buttons for 99 cents again. So I bought 2 more. I bought 2 more of the thing that I've never used. The idea being that if I get closer to the number of buttons that I have to the number of things that I want to do, then I won't feel bad about using one of the buttons to do the thing, and I'll actually do it. We'll see how that works out for me. But so far I'm in about $4 on these dumb dash buttons, and someday I'll use them and it will be magnificent, I promise you. Turn the sprinklers on and wash the car and all that kind of stuff. Speaking of, so we've talked about failures. Let's talk about a couple things that have gone right and gone right for our friends at Microsoft. A year or so ago, Microsoft released a product called Teams that is essentially their multi-person, they're like their group chat tool. It's very much akin to the old school IRC or Slack or those kind of things. And Teams was one of those things that has not had a very great beginning. Microsoft in the last couple of years has adopted this idea of MVP, though them and everybody else. They release a minimum viable product, just enough for the product to really not stink, and then they iterate on it and increase it, but they've got it out in the marketplace. The bad news about Teams is that a bunch of the things that it doesn't do show that there's a difference between Microsoft's definition of minimal and the user's version of minimal. I've not been a big user of Teams, I'll be honest. I do use Slack. I've got 6 or 7 Slack teams open right now. Been using Slack for years, and it's been a great tool for what it does. Teams has not been able to supplant that for a couple of reasons. Number one, for the longest time, you couldn't let external people in, so it was only people on your Office 365 tenant. And then once you were able to do that, switching between teams is painful. So I've got 6 or 7 Slack teams open. As I just bounce between them, it just does its thing. With Teams, it's probably a solid 30, 40 seconds as I switch teams, which makes it difficult to carry on any kind of conversation with anything. Microsoft is improving some of that. You can add guests now. It's not totally perfect, but it's better. But they're clearly looking at it as a different tool than Slack. There's a lot of overlap, but not exactly the same. But one thing that Microsoft has done now is that it used to be a licensed product. You used to have a license to use Teams in your tenant, and that is not the case as of this week. So Microsoft's having a big conference right now, Inspire, out in Las Vegas. It's the new version of the Worldwide Partner Conference. And they announced Monday that Teams now has a free tier. So now anybody with an Office 365 account, and I believe a personal account as well, or no, that's the other one. That's the next one. But anybody with an Office 365 tenant can use Teams for free. Of course, there are some limitations, though they're not onerous. It's enough for you to play with Teams and kind of get a feel for whether you like it or whether you don't. So you can share files in Teams, and those files are stored in Teams. They're stored in the back end in SharePoint, but you get, for the free tier, you get 2 gig of storage per user and 10 gig of shared storage. You have unlimited messages per channel. You can search through them. You can add guests. You can do video chats, one-to-one and group video chats, screen sharing, things like that. So it's getting there. It's got potential. It's not quite there yet. I don't think the folks at Slack have anything to worry about just right now, but it's getting there. And for somebody who their company runs on the Microsoft ecosphere, they've got Office 365 for their email and file sharing with OneDrive and all that. It makes sense to start with Teams and try that first. So this is a good way to do that and not spend any money. So as soon as I was talking about that before the show in the Slack chat room, and Blake asked if we would be moving the podcast chat over to Teams anytime soon. And I said, well, I'm not totally against the idea, but again, I'd have to add anybody who wanted to be in there to my Office 365 tenant, which would require them to have an Office 365 account, which is a little greater barrier to entry than it is to Slack. But I'm not against that. So if you're somebody who is in the chat room now or listening to it online afterwards, let me know if you want to give that a try for Teams. I would be happy to have Teams and Slack run at the same time for a while, just to kind of see what works and what doesn't. But if you've been wanting to try Teams but haven't had a license, now is the time to try that. Apparently, I've got a chat window going there in Slack right now. All right, so another thing that Microsoft has done, and I can't remember if this was part of Inspire or not, is for those of you that have been able to play with a Surface Hub device, the big, 80-inch screens or whatever, they've got a whiteboarding app that's just fun to share things and draw on and all that. They have decided to make that available for Windows now. So you can download the Whiteboard app for Windows devices, and they say that there will be an iOS client coming out for it, and there's also a web client out for it. And this you will require an Office 365 tenant, or I think a Hotmail account, like a personal account. And this is the ability to do these kind of things and mark things up and draw on the whiteboard. I was working with a customer the other day, and I really wished I'd had this, and I wish I'd have looked at this before her and I got on the phone, because it would have been great to mark things up. But you can go out to techcommunity.microsoft.com and read up about that. So I need to play with that more, because I can think of a bunch of times when I would have used that had it been available to me. So go check that out. I think it's a great thing, and I need to play with that more. So another fun thing is I announced back in May that I was going to start working with the folks at Syskit, our sponsor. And I've told the story 100 times, so I'm not going to tell it now, but they came out of the gate a while back, a long time ago, 8-10 years ago, with a product called SP.Kit. I resisted loving it until I tried it, and then I loved it and started, evangelizing it and talking about it ever since. So in May, I came on board with them, doing part-time work, helping them with marketing and things like that. And one of the things I asked about in May when I came on, 2 months ago, whenever that was, they wanted me to write up my thoughts on SP.Kit for my blog, not for them. They didn't have any kind of agenda. They're just like, hey, you've used SP.Kit a bunch over the years. Just write a quick review, put it out on your blog, let people know what you think. From this aspect of somebody that uses it, not from them, but from me. Okay, cool. They asked for that in May, by the way. I published it today. Here we are, the last half of July. What I found was, when I wrote that review, was I just couldn't stop talking about all the fun things that I liked in SP.Kit. And so I think when they first asked for this, I think they were asking for 500-600 words, something like that. I believe the final version clocked in at 1,600 words, something like that. And so basically it was just me talking about the things that SP.Kit does that I use a lot and that I really like. And I didn't get to talk about all of the things because I had to stop at some point to finish the article up and get it published before the end of the year, before somebody died or the world ended, whatever. And so I'll probably have to write up some more on some of the other pieces. But the piece that I wrote up about today is about the reporting functions and the comparing functions. And those are two that I've used the most. The reporting function is, again, the one that they did initially, and that is this idea that you've got a SharePoint farm and you need some sort of report, either a report for you as the SharePoint administrator to get an idea how things are growing and where things are at, who has permission to what and all that, but also the ability to make a report for your boss or your boss's boss or whoever, the CTO, to give them an overview of what SharePoint looks like. For me, I've had to do that numerous times in my career. And while I was able to get the information that they wanted, I was also getting information that they didn't care about, and I was not able to put that information in a form that they cared about. They wanted graphs and numbers and things like that, and I was all just tables and data and just loving it. It's like reading the Matrix, and they hated that. And SP.Kit was a good way to merge those two things. So I could have this tool that would give me all the information that I wanted, so I could compare against baselines and month to month, but then take that same information in that same tool and create a very polished looking report that I could email on to somebody else. And it creates PDFs and Word docs and all that kind of stuff. So that was really when I fell in love with it. And then they added this compare feature later on. And Eric in the chat room is mentioning this, that it's great when you walk into a client and you can run this report quickly and just see what's going on inside of the farm. So with the compare, I show in the screenshots, I took a screenshot of a farm in April, and then I took a screenshot of the farm a couple of days ago and just kind of walked through some of the changes. So it points out the thing in the compare screen will let you show everything or only differences or only things that are the same. I mean, they've just kind of thought of everything. But for the differences, it had later patch level on it. It had new site collections that didn't exist in April. There were some changes to the databases. I'd made some changes there, and it shows all that stuff. So now I can go back and look, and especially in an environment where there's multiple cooks in the kitchen, you can lose track of who's doing what. So running something like SP.Kit and comparing it month to month gives you an idea of what changes are being made in your environment. And also help you budget for the future. So as you need to make budget plans for 2019, you can look at this and say, hey, we're going to need more storage. We're going to need more servers. We're going to need more whatever. And you can show these trends and put it in graphs and stuff that people with MBAs just love. So again, I started writing this review and just could not stop. And at one point, they're just like, whatever you have written so far, just end it. Just type 2 words, just type the end and publish it. So I'll have to go on and cover some of the other features that I didn't go. But that is out on my blog. You can go to toddclint.com/spdockitreview and read up on that. And I've got links in the article for where you can get a free trial and things like that. So I recommend just going out there and kicking the tires. It's a great product. The company was founded by some great technical nerd folks, SharePoint MVPs and all that, people that just love the product. And they saw a hole that, they saw the product that they wanted to have and they made it happen. They were the change they wanted to see in the world. And you can definitely tell when you use the product, it's got personality, it's got flair, and it's made by people who love the software. So go ahead and check that out. While I've been out just publishing everything everywhere, just a few moments ago, like maybe 5 minutes before I went online, my next Petri article was published. And this one's called SharePoint Best Intentions, Planning versus Reality. So this is a continuation of a post I wrote a couple of weeks ago about how to prepare yourselves for the upcoming SharePoint 2019 upgrade that you'll all be doing. And this is how, before you upgrade, now is a good time to look at your current farm, be it SharePoint 2013, 2016, whatever, and see how it compares to what you thought your farm was going to look like when you installed it. And what I mean by that is if you made any governance, declarations, things like that, we will grow by site collections, databases will not be larger than 100 gig, those kind of things. Now is a good time to look and see how that actually worked out. And I wanted to publish it, but I don't know who owns the rights, but there's this great meme on the internet. It's a picture of a college campus or something, of a sidewalk, and there's a sidewalk, an intersection of sidewalk, and then there's a path where people have cut the corner, and the sidewalk has a sign that says, designed, and then the path worn through the grass says, actual user usage, something like that. But it just goes to show that somebody sat down, somebody very smart, somebody very well educated, and laid out all these sidewalks, and the users walked up and saw the sidewalk that made them walk all the way to the corner and all the way across, and we can just walk around this bush. That's kind of what I'm saying what we should do right now with your SharePoint environments, is see what the actual user experience is, for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's good to know if anything that the user are doing are going to get you in trouble when you finally do your upgrade. But number two, it lets you know where you misunderstood how SharePoint was going to be used, so you can start making plans in SharePoint 2019 to do a little better with the things, the way that people actually use SharePoint. So, if you've got declarations about lists won't get over a certain number of items, but then you find out you've got a bunch of lists with more than those items, then you need to find out what they're doing, and if there's a better way to do it, or if that just doesn't work well, and that you need to change your plan, those kind of things. So that now's a good time to do that while you're not wrapped up in the upgrade itself, and you've got some time to breathe, hopefully. So go out to petri.com and read that article, and I'll probably post a blog post on that too, so you can get there from there. And Petri's got a comment system, so go ahead and leave a comment and let them know what you think about that. Finally, Shane was gone last week because he doesn't love you. Shane is gone this week because he still doesn't love you. And Shane will be gone next week because he's a horrible person, though I may be gone next week too. We'll have to see. But next week, Shane is going to be at the Business Applications Summit out in Redmond. This is a thing that Microsoft is putting on, and it's all around Flow and Power Apps and those kind of things. That's one of the things that Shane loves right now. Not quite as much as he loves me, but it's close. But he wanted me to tell you, number one, that I'm cooler than him and smarter than him and better looking than him. And number two, that if you wanted to live stream the keynote for this summit that he's going to be at, you can do that now. I posted a link in the chat, and I will try to get this podcast produced before that keynote actually happens, so you can use that link. But you can go to flow.microsoft.com, and they've got a link in there, the Business Application Summit Keynote live on Monday. So when you watch that, look in the crowd, see if you can see Shane's ugly mug as they pan across the crowd, all these people that are all excited about the business applications. All right. Well, it is time now to talk about community events. So today, again, July 18th, one of the community events is I'm driving up to see my friends in Minneapolis because north is that way. Right after we get done here, going to grab some lunch and then head up to Minneapolis. We're having a little SharePoint get together. So that's one of the community events. But next month is SharePoint Saturday Charlotte. That is August 11th in Charlotte. You can go out and check that out. SharePoint Saturday New England is October 20th. Go check that out. I wish I could make that one because there's a bunch of people out there I'd love to catch up with. And see that. As for promotion, Shane will be at the Business Application Summit next week. I think he's presenting something. I don't remember. Who cares? And then SP TechCon is, next month, August 26th. We will be out there. I'll be out there. Shane will be out there. Lori will be out there. We should have some kind of a get-together for the folks doing the podcast because I know some other folks are going to be there. So I'll talk to Lori. She's kind of the scheduling manager and see what things are going on conference-wise and see if we can't get together for lunch or just hang out and everybody just sit around, chat about how much we love Office 365, how much we don't like Shane. There's a lot of things we can talk about. But that will be just in a month out in Boston. All right, folks. Tried to squeeze everything in. Tried to not make this an hour-long show like it does when that chatterbox Shane is with us. Thanks to everybody for listening. In the chat room, I'll be around for a while. For those of you that are listening to the MP3, the podcast or the video, you can reach out to us. I'm Todd at toddclint.com. Shane is Shane at boldzebras.com or Shane at powerapps911.com. You can reach us on Twitter. I'm at Todd Clint. He is at Shane's Cows. Let us know what you think. Let us know, any way we can make this podcast better. We're trying some stuff with the production. I don't want to call out what I'm trying just to see if people like it or don't like it, but let us know if there's anything that we can do better. We want to make this a good download and a good use of your time. Thanks, everybody. And next week, I don't know if we'll be on Wednesday morning. Shane and I both have obligations, but we will let you know. Check us out on Twitter. We'll post something out there. Thanks, everybody. Have a good week.